Thank you very much, Derek, and thank you, all of you, for coming this afternoon. As you saw in the video, a lot of terrible things are happening in Kashmir as we speak. I just want to reiterate one or two points that Rafiq and Alia made, and that is that the total population of Kashmir is 13 million, and its area is approximately 86,000 square miles. That makes Kashmir perhaps in terms of population larger than about 114 countries in the world. And yet you see that the people of Kashmir have been denied their right of self-determination, when in fact, as Rafiq mentioned, in South Sudan, earlier this year there was a referendum when South Sudan was part of Sudan, not even a separate country, whereas Kashmir has never been a part of India, never ever, except for the occupation that has gone on since 1947. If you look at Kashmir's geography, its topography, everything points towards Central Asia. All of Kashmir's rivers flow away from India, not into India. In fact, if you look at the mountains in Kashmir, if it hadn't been for the tunnel that was blasted by the Indian Army after the war of 1965, it's called the Banihal Tunnel. If they didn't have that tunnel, there would be no link between Kashmir and India at all. In fact, previously they had to go around a circuitous road because they couldn't get into Kashmir properly, but then they realized that if there were a war and India had to transport troops quickly, then they would need to have some kind of a link. And that's a several miles long tunnel that has been blasted into mountains so that Kashmir would be linked with India. So looked at whichever way, Kashmir does not belong to India, yet it is under Indian occupation. 700,000 Indian troops are there, and they are perpetrating horrible crimes against the people of Kashmir. I want to mention one other point as well, and that is that I'm sure you know, in August of 1990, when the Iraqi army invaded Kuwait and occupied Kuwait, there was an international uproar. Immediately, the US government mobilized the United Nations and a lot of other countries, and they invaded not only Kuwait, but they actually attacked Iraq. And they said, well, we cannot allow this kind of an occupation to take place. Kuwait used to be part of Iraq. Earlier it was talked about that, most of the problems that you see in the world, whether it's whether it is in Sudan or in Cyprus or in Kashmir or even in the Middle East, Kuwait was part of Iraq, which was separated by the British because they wanted to create a problem for the Iraqis. And so the Americans and the British and their allies said, well, this cannot stand. How can we have a country being occupied by an alien power? Okay, if that's the logic that you want to use, well, why is India occupying Kashmir? Kashmir has never been a part of India. And in fact, the Kashmiri people are asking only for their right to self-determination. There are 2 United Nations Security Council resolutions relating to that. But what is holding the world community? I mean, why don't you hear about these things or read about it in the Globe and Mail or see any documentary on the CBC or anywhere else? Compare that, for instance, to events in Palestine, although they still don't get enough fair coverage, but the fact is that the plight of the Palestinian people is known around the world. And yet when you talk about Kashmir, many times you talk to somebody, you mention Kashmir, and they don't know whether you're talking about apples or oranges. They don't even know what Kashmir means. They don't even know what it is. Why is that silence? I believe that there are 2 or 3 fundamental reasons for this. Number one, that India has been extremely successful in trying to project an image of being a democratic society. Sure, there are elections held in India periodically, and they may even be free, although if you look at the internal Indian dynamics, I wish you would study that carefully. I believe that India practices religious apartheid to the nth degree. India's caste system is a blot on the conscience of humanity. There are several levels of castes in India, At the top are the Brahmins, that are the top class of people. And at the bottom are the group of people that are called, they themselves refer to as Dalits, but the Indians refer to them as untouchables. And why do they call them untouchables? These are the lowest level, because these are the people that cannot use the same utensils that the other classes of Indians use. They cannot draw water from the same well that the other classes of Indians draw water from. They cannot look upon a Brahman because that would pollute them. Can you imagine the degradation of the Hindu people of India, the Dalits? And there are 250 million of them in India today. And I don't know why the rest of the world turns a blind eye to the fact that India is a religious apartheid state. Now, if they do this to their own people, the Hindus, why should we expect them to do anything better to the Muslims of Kashmir? So that's the first point. Secondly, and this of course has come about in recent years, that India has projected itself as being a vast market. And so every country, every Western country, whether it's America or Canada or Britain, they're all rushing to India, and they're after the 350 million Indians that constitute the middle class. But they forget that in that very India, there are 350 million people, according to Indian government's own statistics, that live in absolute poverty. They earn less than $1 a day. Millions of people actually spend their nights in sewers or in gutters or on the sidewalks in India's vast cities. This is a blot on the conscience of humanity, that they would condemn their own people to this kind of subservience and this kind of living. Yet, the Western world is only interested in the 350 million middle-class Indians who are a source of income for Western multinationals, who seek contracts with the IT business in India and other businesses that are emerging in India. And so it is the lure of money. And you can see now, at least I'm glad, here in Canada, in the US, in Europe, people are finally waking up to the reality that we have been taken for a ride, that we have been, our rights have been usurped. These gangsters and banksters and all these other CEOs, criminals that have been robbing people left, right, and center, and ordinary people have been impoverished, that this cannot go on, that this has to stop. And I hope and pray that this would also transfer to understanding India's situation better. But let's look at the larger picture. If you look at the map of Kashmir, it sits literally at the top of the world. In fact, Eric Margolis has actually written a very good book about it. It's called War at Top of the World. And if you study that book, I mean, of course, he has been to Kashmir many times. He has studied the situation. But if you look at the map of Kashmir, to southeast of Kashmir is India. To the north of it is China, and of course Tibet also, but the portion that is referred to as Aksai Chin, which is part of Kashmir that is now under Chinese occupation. And then to the northwest and southwest of Kashmir, you have Afghanistan and Central Asia, and then Pakistan. That's how Kashmir is located. And Kashmir, in the thinking of Western policy planners, is crucial because they would like to use Kashmir as perhaps some kind of a monitoring base of Chinese developments and Chinese military operations. So Kashmir is important from that point of view. And for the US, it would rather link up with India because it wants to use India against China rather than with Pakistan, which is considered to be virtually a failed state, largely as a consequence of the war that has been going on in Afghanistan that has now been brought into Pakistan as well by the Americans. Incidentally, there is now direct evidence that, you know, American, what used to be referred to as Blackwater operatives, and now for, you know, reasons we all know, they have changed their name from Blackwater to X-Services, because they know that Blackwater has become so tarnished, its image has become so tarnished by the murders that they have perpetrated in Pakistan, the terrorist acts that they have perpetrated over there. You know the case of Raymond Davis, who was a CIA contractor, arrested in Pakistan when he shot dead 2 Pakistani civilians in broad daylight on a busy street in Lahore on January 27, and then under American pressure, the government of Pakistan had to let him go. But from his cell phone, the Pakistani government retrieved cell numbers of 66 people that were on the United States government's list of terrorists. 66 people that this man, Raymond Davis, working for the CIA, was in contact with those terrorists. And not one phone call, they had several phone calls with those people. And these were people supposedly on the US list of terrorists. So terrorism has been brought into Pakistan as a result of American operations. Now, where does Kashmir fit into this? As Derek had very rightly pointed out, in the beginning, there can be no peace in Afghanistan unless there is peace in Kashmir. Because Kashmir, Afghanistan, and Pakistan are intimately linked. And I personally believe that as the Afghans continue to force the foreign occupation forces and drive them out of their country, that Kashmir would become the next flashpoint. Although America would try to bring their war into Pakistan, but I think they would find it very difficult. Because in Pakistan now, at the official level, there is this recognition that America is intimately involved in destabilizing Pakistan. And of course, in Pakistan, every intelligence agency, every country's spies are involved. Indian intelligence agents are involved. The Mossad is involved. British intelligence is involved. The Americans are involved. The Afghan intelligence agency is involved. I mean, you name it, they're all there. They're all either in Balochistan or in Punjab or in the province that borders Afghanistan. There are all kinds of operatives involved in carrying out terrorist activities. And this is documented. This is not something that I'm sort of making up. But once American forces are driven out, once NATO forces are driven out of Afghanistan, then I think the conflict would shift to Kashmir again. And the danger that I see, as Alia had rightly pointed out, in Kashmir is that Kashmir is crucial both for Pakistan as well as India. India doesn't want to give up Kashmir because they're afraid that if they gave up, then the rest of India would unravel. I don't think that that's a reality. That may not happen, although there are at least 5 other insurgencies taking place in India, in the northeast of India. People that are struggling, the Nagaland people, the Bodos and Mizoram and other people, they are struggling for their rights. And also historically, India has never had fixed borders. I mean, you look at any map, you look at India's history, you can never say that, well, this was India. Its borders were always flexible depending on who was ruling India. So if you had a powerful ruler in India, their borders stretched out. If you had a weak ruler in India, its borders shrank. And that would again happen in India. I believe that.